Joining us now on the phone is Congressman Ron Paul. Congressman, how you doing? Thanks so much for being with us.
Good to be with you.
Well, now we are on the cusp of the new legislative session. What is Ron Paul's priority one?
My priority one is the same as has been priority one for all my political life, and that is to promote the cause of liberty. And, of course, more specifically, I will be dedicated to sound money and working on my Financial Services Committee as chairman of the Monetary Policy Subcommittee. So I'll be working on the Federal Reserve, sound money, balanced budgets, but the main purpose is to promote the cause of liberty.
Absolutely. And you know what? One of the things that I have to tell you, a lot of my listeners were excited about, a lot of people who are fans of yours, is you taking over that House subcommittee on domestic monetary policy. Can you talk a little bit about that as to how you're going to be taking on the Federal Reserve, the monster that is the Federal Reserve?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. I find it fascinating because it's a subcommittee that nobody's ever wanted to be on, and there's never been any activity, and it's never been of interest to anybody. And yet, from the very first day I was in Congress, and I've been here a couple times, I was always appointed at request to be on this subcommittee, and it's done nothing. But with the financial crisis and with the emphasis I've made, it's all of a sudden becoming a committee that a lot of people are looking at. But my main goal is transparency. I'd like reform. I'd like to get rid of the Fed someday, but transparency is the name of the game. And that is where we're getting the support. The American people, even though they might disagree with a lot of my politics and cutting back on the spending and the sound system, they are absolutely in favor of knowing more about the Fed.
Sure, absolutely. And that's one of the interesting things. I mean, Ben Bernanke has come out in a really sort of strange way for any Federal Reserve chairman and become extremely political, sort of, suggesting to the president certain domestic monetary policy or certain domestic spending policies and priorities. What do you think about that and the Federal Reserve going from the sort of, the role that he's taken on before to a much more public role, at least, in the political sphere?
Well, I think it's great because it's a reflection of us making progress. Before, nobody paid any attention, and they listened to, just his pronouncements, and nobody raised questions. But last year, when we ended up getting 320 co-sponsors of the bill to audit the Fed, they actually hired a PR person, which is pretty amazing for the Federal Reserve. And then all of a sudden, he's been on some talk shows and been taking more interviews, and I think he's on the defensive, and he should be because, and I'm always careful. I do not personalize it because I think he's inherited the system. The system has been around since 1913, so it's not only Bernanke, it's Greenspan and everybody else. But the system is showing some real cracks in it because they've given us the financial crisis, and they're supposed to give us, a sound economy and low unemployment, and I think it's a reflection of their failure.
Sure. Now let's turn to another legislative section here, Obamacare. I mean, obviously the American people are screaming about it now. They have been from its onset, 61% saying it's going to raise healthcare costs. In fact, it looks like the cost curve has gone up over the last year. Do you see, with your fellow Republicans, and especially those new Republicans coming into the House and Senate, a legislative route, maybe not to do it in one foul swoop, but to do it in bits and pieces?
Well, they're going to try. We may have some success, but the numbers just aren't there. We have the numbers in the House, but let's say we repeal just the mandate, which would be a big help for anybody who want to just opt out of the system. As bad as government is, if he could opt out of systems, you don't have quite the totalitarianism that we dread. But if the House passes it, what's the Senate going to do? And if the Senate did pass it, what's the president going to do? He's going to veto it. The only thing I could see some of this getting through is that there'll have to be a trade-off somewhere where they can't get anything else passed, and the president caves in and says, "Oh, okay, we'll make this voluntary." But the whole idea of him permitting this program to be voluntary proves that it's a terrible system because it means that you have to force people into it. What good is the system if you have to force it into it? So I'm hesitant to say, oh, yeah, we're on our way and we're going to get this repealed, but it certainly will not be expanded, with the new Congress.
Absolutely. Now, looking at some of the new rules you've got in the House, one of them, of course, is focusing on the Constitution, saying that you have to look at what constitutional powers, Congress has to be able to pass a certain law. You've been obviously one of the most outspoken members on the Constitution prior to the Tea Party movement, prior to election 2008. You sort of were the chest thumper on this issue. What do you think about that rule? Does that get you excited, or do you say it's still not far enough?
Well, I'm glad they're thinking about it, but we've had a rule of sorts like this, and I remember reading the reports of it. They come out of the committee's supposed to justify, and they will usually add a sentence or two at the end, the justification under the Constitution. And what it says is the justification comes from the General Welfare Clause or the Interstate Commerce Clause. So it isn't so easy. They talk about having courses up here to teach people about the Constitution,
sure.
But it depends on who's going to do the interpreting. If you're not interested in the original intent, if you're not interested in the 9th and 10th Amendment and in these other amendments, just to justify it under general welfare, then you can do anything. But I wonder what would happen, the next time they want to go to war without a declaration. Are they going to vote for it or aren't they going to vote for it?
Absolutely. We're speaking with Congressman Ron Paul. And, one of the things that obviously a lot of people are focusing on is the federal budget right now. Who's going to be writing it? Who's going to be putting it together? Will there actually be one in 2011? We've got Paul Ryan at the helm right now of the Budget Committee. How do you think that process is going to go down? And do you think he's going to have the success he's looking for? I know he has his roadmap, and you have your ideas about the budget. How do you see that process happening and unfolding? And do you think it's going to be successful in being able to roll back federal spending?
No, and I don't think it's going to be successful, but that's not to take away from Paul, because he's going to do a good job, and he's going to make proposals to really have cuts. But just the way the system is, it's not going to work. When you have to face up to the Senate and the president to get a budget passed, it's going to be very, very difficult. And besides, there's one shortcoming on some of the fiscal conservatives is that they don't want to touch any of the militarism, the military spending. That's sort of off limits. And if you take the entitlements, if they're off limits, there's not much left. The momentum is so great. Just look at what happened in the lame duck session on getting unemployment benefits extended. So it's not going to be easy. I think the key vote is going to be the deficit increase. If you wanted to have one vote to reverse this whole trend, it would be don't raise the deficit.
All right.
But, boy, I'll tell you what, that would cause panic. That would cause panic everywhere because that means government is closing down. The world has come to an end,
right.
And then, a lot of people will cave in and say, well, we can't throw the people out on the street. But what's going to happen if we have runaway inflation or another currency crisis or something? Right. Everybody gets thrown out on the street.
Well, in terms of the deficit limit or the deficit cap and, having to raise that and raise the deficit limit, what do you think about that? And do you think, how would you vote when it comes down to it?
Well, I'm not going to vote to increase the national debt. I've never voted for any of the spending.
Sure.
So I would hardly want to accommodate the people who have been voting for all this spending and believe in big government.
Right.
So, no, I could not possibly vote for it. They can't. Sometimes if things balance out, if there's a tax bill and they raise taxes in one area and lower taxes in another, I look at the arithmetic. If they lower more taxes than they raise, then I vote for it. If it isn't, I won't do it. So there's nothing that could balance the increase in the national debt because that's the rubber stamp of saying endless spending is the way of life, and we don't have to act and live within our means.
Fascinating. That's going to definitely be one of the issues.
I think so.
And then lastly here, and this is why you're one of my favorite guests, because you can talk about anything. You're not giving, your staff doesn't give us any parameters. You just say, oh, yeah, just ask him because you know about it. States running into major problems right now. Obviously, the state of New York, tens of millions, billions of dollars in the red. Illinois, we saw today, $13 billion. California, $25-30 billion. Are the public sector unions going to have to concede here? I mean, is that the number one cause? Do you see that as one of the biggest problems of state spending and state expenditures?
Oh, yes, and I don't see that happening. I think, that's what should happen, but I think they are still so powerful. Just think how much clout they had to get the, when they did the bailing out of General Motors, the union, right. the union message was protected. Their retirements were protected, but the others were not. So I think it's going to take a total bankruptcy to really undo this. But I would think the correct thing to do is that we shouldn't bail them out. The state should declare a bankruptcy, and they should renegotiate their contracts. That's what a business person does, and that's what they should do. But the information is getting out. The trouble is there's probably just a few more people receiving than those producing. If 55% are on the receiving end, and we're going to have the dictatorship of the majority, right, there's no protection of the minority rights.
Absolutely. And just one last question. My audience bugs me every day to ask you whenever you're here. Are you going to be running for president in 2012?
Maybe.
Okay. Every politician's favorite answer. Thank you so much, Congressman.
Okay.
It's always a pleasure.
Thank you.